our April Teen Science Cafe presentation. We are excited you're here and ask that you to be respectful during the presentation and save questions for the Q&A section. Check out our Teen Science Cafe Raleigh on Instagram and Facebook. We love it if you followed us and stay up to date for more amazing cafes. You can also view our YouTube recordings of this Teen Science Cafe and past cafes on the museum's YouTube channel.
All right, so our presenter today is Kira Nuviae. She is double majoring in fisheries and wildlife biology and chemistry at North Carolina State University, and she previously interned with North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission's Habitat Conservation Division and is the current Museum Ornithology Lab Technician. She works with all sorts of alive and not so alive birds and hopes to use this knowledge to help streamline collection processes. Give it up for our presenter.
So hello, I didn't know they were going to introduce me that much. That means my first slide about me is already kind of done. My name is Kira Nuviae. My major is fisheries and wildlife conservation biology at NC State, but I work here part-time as an ornithologist in the basement. I do a lot of work with alive birds. About once a month we'll go out banding, but I do a lot of work with our specimens down in our basement. So I'm going to split up our birds that we're talking about today in generally 4 different genres. We have songbirds, raptors, game birds, and seabirds. I'm doing this because when people work with birds, they typically work in these specific categories. These birds kind of require different ways to work with them, typically require different permits. So you typically have to do different things when you're working with these birds. I specifically work mostly with songbirds. When we're talking about live songbirds, there's about three different types of data collection. We have tracking, sampling, and banding. So when we track a bird, we're going to put a little transmitter on their back. It's going to go on kind of like a backpack, except if the backpack was around your legs. It'd probably be uncomfortable for any other mammal, but luckily it works out for birds pretty well because their legs are pretty much in the middle of their body. If you're doing tracking with, say, game birds or other big birds, this isn't as big of a deal. It can sometimes go around their neck, sometimes it'll go around their wings, but when we're considering songbirds, this is the best way to do it. The transmitter weight needs to be pretty small. It needs to be 5% or less of their body weight. If it's more than this, or even if it is about 5%, it's going to weigh that bird down, and then now we have an issue with if the bird's even going to live, because it takes a lot of energy to fly, and these things can only eat so much and only hunt so much. So once we have this transmitter on the bird, there's about 2 different types that we actually track. We have homing tracking and triangulation. Homing is basically you're walking around with a big antenna, and you're going to kind of point where you think the bird is, and it's going to beep. So if you think of it like a metal detector, except the bird is the metal, and the radar is basically the metal detector, and if your bird is over there, you're going to go beep, 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 and then you kind of know it's over there, but now you have to actually look for it because this thing is going to be exactly like foot to foot where the bird is. It's going to be a little bit off. As for triangulation, with the bird that has a transmitter on its back, now we have all these radio towers around. So we're not walking towards the bird is flying around, and when it passes one of these radio towers, it sends out a ping or a type of data that can show up on an app or a type of map, and so it can be looked on, and from there, this is typically used for longer distances. If you want to kind of see where a bird is moving migrationally, maybe you want to see what their territory looks like, this is a great way to do that. Another type of data sampling that can be done is sampling. This is done by capturing a bird, and what you do is you bleed them a little bit. This is basically just prick the inside of their wing and take a little bit of blood. The blood goes in that kind of small vial, and that can be brought back to the lab for sampling or data collection or whatever it needs to be used for. A lot of the time, the sampling will be used to check if there's a lot of chemicals in the environment. You can check for mercury pretty well if you're looking at the blood of a live animal. So this is a really important way to check the health of an ecosystem or the health of the animals in the ecosystem. Now, the most common type of data sampling is bird banding. And with bird banding, we will use 2 different types of bands. The main type of band is aluminum bands, and it's what it sounds like. It's an aluminum band, except they have specific unique numbers to them. So every bird that gets this number is getting their own unique number, so they get some cool, crazy fashion that brings in the girls and maybe the boys, and also gives us data. Songbirds specifically will use sizes 0A to 2. If you look up there, I don't know if you can read it, that's a really small range. The rest of them will go up typically to game birds, to seabirds, to raptors, except these specific bands wouldn't be used for raptors, but the sizes might be similar. As for color bands, these are similar, they're bands, but now they're made out of plastic and they don't have numbers on them. The whole point of color bands is to be able to identify who our bird is from far away. With this, we're typically expecting to not catch these birds again, or just to make it easier for data collection. A lot of times we'll color band birds that are tree dwellers, so we're not expecting to be able to catch them so high in the trees. We're just hoping that we can see where they are at least. This will typically be paired up with transmitting and looking and tracking for birds. Now, the bird banding project that we do, I mean me, John, and some other colleagues, is a bird banding in the private land of Uares. The Uares, if you've ever been to the zoo, that's basically where the Uares is. This banding station is about 30 minutes away, up in the mountains a little bit more. And this specific piece of land is kept in secondary succession in kind of a grassland ecosystem. Now, this is really important because a lot of land in the Uares is privately owned, and privately owned land sometimes has been forgotten by the landowners, basically. A lot of tree farms will be built up, and now it's just like a loblolly tree farm, and you only have loblollies. So by clearing this land and letting it grow up again into this grassland, you now have a massive amount of biodiversity, because you have all these different plants and all these different insects, because the more plants you have, the more niches you have, meaning you can have more different species of different things. Although plants grow fast, they like to grow, and so we have to keep it at this grassland state about every 3 years, and we can do this by burning the land. This is what the land looks like normally. This is just one little section looking at it. Very interesting. It's grass. It's incredible. Grassland. Now, the U.S. Forest Service is the one that manages this land, and the little red sections in there is the parts that they burn separately. So each of these sections will be burned every 3 years, not all at once, but in a kind of a rotation. So like 1 year, one section will be burned, 1 year, another section will be burned, and it'll go all the way around, and then you're back to the first section, which is now it's on its 3rd year and should be burned again. And this is what it looks like burning. Fire, wow. So when you burn a piece of land, you typically have some fire lined around, and you burn the outside of that section, and the fire will move inward and burn the land, and now it looks like this. And wow, it's ground, and it's just ground. And it looks kind of trashy, but it's not a big deal, because about 3 months later or so, you're back to this. And now we have more grass again, which is exactly what we want. And we leave it for about 3 years, and we have some more bushes grow up, and we do it all over again. And so we have this managed by the Wildlife Resources Commission and the U.S. Forest Service. This includes the burning, but sometimes if we wait too long to do this, a lot of trees can grow up, and even though trees are great, we don't really want it in this grassland area, so sometimes you have to go in with a chainsaw and take the tree down, or do some specific herbicide work to clear off certain pathways. Now, how do we catch these birds? So what we're going to do is we're going to ask them really nicely to come up and please tell us who they are and what they are, and that's how we wish it would work. And what we use instead is mist nets. And mist nets are basically very long, thin pieces of net. As you can see, there's kind of a picture in there. There's a hummingbird in that net right now. And this net is really hard to see, especially when you have a lot of different foliage in the background. All these black lines kind of blend right into all the shadows. Here's another picture of a mist net. I've walked into a mist net. It sucks. You get caught in every single place on your clothes. But using these mist nets, we have to find out where we want to place them. And this can be done by looking around the land and seeing, oh, some birds fly there. Maybe that's a good place to put the nets. Once we place a net down, that is a net lane, and that will stay a net lane, and it'll keep that number. A lot of the numbers up there aren't really in a cohesive order, because we just use whatever numbers we haven't used yet, and sometimes we skip over numbers for some reason and decide, oh, maybe we should use those numbers later. But we don't keep these nets up all year round. We put them up and then take them down at the end of the banding session. And then but whenever we re-put up these nets again for the next session, they go in the same place. And this is important because when we're banding the bird, we want to know which net it came from so we can know what part of the environment they came from. Now, here's a little list of some of the data taken. I'll just read it out. We have the band number, band size, species, cloacal patch, brood patch, fat, body molt, flight feather molt, wing size, net caught in, sex, and age. So that's a lot of stuff. And so there's a lot of data that we take. And I'm just going to start out about how we do a little bit of all this. First is a good thing to take is fat. This diagram up here is basically kind of the fat levels we go off of. The white is no fat at all. That's the muscle area. And the yellow is going to be that actual fat. What we can do, this is one of my colleagues, she's blowing on the bird with a straw. The straw helps concentrate the air so we can actually see into these sections better. You can easily blow on the bird with your mouth. Just sometimes you get a little lightheaded because you end up blowing really hard for a little bit longer than you expect to. So here's a picture of kind of what the fat looks like. That red is going to be the muscle, and the fat is going to be that kind of yellowish white color. A good example of like a fat level 1 is that right side, and a fat level 4 or 5 is going to be that left side. It'd be a little easier to tell if it was a 4 or 5 if we could see the legs, because at about 5 it starts building up on the legs and other parts of the body. Now for cloacal patch and brood patch, this is how we tell if the bird is a male or a female. Now, we can really only use this during the summer months because this is the breeding months of the bird. The rest of the year, the birds don't really show any of this because they have no reason to have it. For brood patch, this is going to tell whether the bird is a girl, although this is a general rule, but it's not always true. For example, woodpeckers actually, a lot of the time, the males also have brood patches because they both take turns sitting on the eggs. As for a cloacal patch, a female can sometimes have a 1 just because they need to poo, but most of the time that's going to mean that the bird is a male. So here's an example of a brood patch. I just put a picture of a chicken up there because if you've ever seen a chicken that's nesting, they have this massive patch on their stomach because they want to lay on their eggs. The one on the left, I think, is a catbird, but that's an example of what a brood patch on a songbird would look like. So what a brood patch is basically is that the bird sheds all of its feathers on its kind of stomach area and builds up a lot of fluid and blood in this because they want to warm up that area as much as possible so that when they're on their eggs, they can transfer as much heat as possible. If you've ever heard the thing about if someone gets hypothermia, you want to like strip them down and as much like skin contact as possible, that's like that, but except with eggs and babies. All right, so how we take wing and weight. Wing is nice and easy. Luckily, we have something called a wing ruler, where you just put it up at the top of the wing and then push out the primaries of the wing feathers a little bit, and then just see how many millimeters that goes out. As for weight, as you can see, this bird gets a little nice cup to sit in for a few seconds that we put on a scale. This bird is only in there for like maybe 3 seconds as it weighs, and then we take it out. Typically, weight is the last thing we do because this is the time that the bird is most likely to get away, and weight is important, but it's better to get all the other data before the bird flies away. Now, as for molt, molt is a very important thing for us to know. If you guys ever watched Phineas and Ferb and like know what an aglet is, which is that little plastic part on your shoe, it basically looks like the feather is coming out of an aglet, or you can think it's kind of coming out of this straw type of structure. And this straw structure is that new feather growing in, so not the old feather kind of like retracting or whatever. After a while, this structure, the sheath scientifically, will start to break down either through wear and tear, or the bird itself will start to pick this off. The picture on the right is a good example of molt in the primary feathers. The arrow pointing is pointing towards some of the body molt feathers, but you can see that those feathers growing in don't match up with the rest of the primaries. That's what we can call a growth bar, because those feathers are growing in at different times and so have like a different barring, if that makes sense. Now, to age a bird, this is about the hardest thing to do when we're banding a bird. This involves seeing either if the bird is fully ossified, but a lot of the time we're going to look at the molt. In terms of ossification, it depends on a certain time of year that we can actually tell. We can't always use ossification because certain times of the year, all birds are already ossified. They all have their skulls completely built in. Ossification is basically growing more bone on your head. If you've ever seen a baby human, their heads are really squishy. And so sometimes when they come out of the womb, their head is like really flat on the back or on the side. You can kind of consider this the same for a baby bird. They have almost like no built-in bone structure yet, so they have a very squishy head. And so when they start to get that more bone structure, that means they're older. And the way we can tell this is we can look on the head, and up on the screen, I believe it's going up to down. So the white is non-ossified and the dark color is ossification. Ossification, when we're looking at a skull, is going to look like a bunch of little dots. Think of it as little pillars connecting two like sheaths of bone together. This is nice and easy to tell when you're skinning a bird, because all of a sudden there's no brain and there's no skin in the way. When you're aging a bird when it's alive, it's going to be a little harder because you have to part all the skin on the head. Sometimes with slightly bigger birds like mockingbirds, they just have too much flesh in between, so it's going to always look young even if it isn't. As for molt, this is typically how we're going to tell if a bird is old or not. What we're basically going to look at, I should have gotten a better picture, is going to be those primary coverts. So the primaries are those main big feathers that that right hand is holding onto. The ones kind of right above it that are kind of that grayish color, those are the primary coverts. This is a really good example of a younger bird. These younger birds, those primary coverts will either be worn, they'll be less colorful. A lot of bluebirds are going to have, like, not the species bluebird, but a lot of birds that are blue are going to have kind of this brown primary covert instead of like a nice uniform, like everything is blue from the greater coverts to the primary coverts. Now we can also tell if the bird is older or younger by the shape of those primary coverts. The more round that those coverts are is the older they're going to be. When they're younger, they're just growing in, so they're going to be kind of tapered and sharp. Now, why is banding this important? Because this sounds like a lot of work, and it is. One of the biggest things that we learn from this is how we can manage these species and conserve them, because birds are pretty awesome. In terms of management, like I mentioned before, we have to burn this land. So you know what would suck? If we burned this land where we knew a bunch of birds were at that time of year. So out of curiosity, what do you guys think is the best time to burn? Does anyone want to guess? Fall? Winter, because a lot of migrating species will be other places. What was that? Winter again. All right, you guys are basically there. Winter. Winter is a great place, great time to burn. Also, the beginning of spring is a good time to burn, because this is when stuff just starts to grow up, but a lot of bird species hasn't come back yet, and stuff hasn't grown up too much, so you can burn it down, so when it grows up again, it doesn't grow up as much. A lot of times, burns will be between January and March. Fall, you can absolutely burn. Typically, it's just unnecessary because you're going into winter anyway, and all these plants are going to die. So you can, and a lot of times, if that's a good time for the weather, it's a good time to do it. Summer, it tends to get too hot, and there's a lot of wind, so there's some problems with maybe the fire jumping the fire line, and now you have fire everywhere. You didn't want it everywhere. All right, we're going to take a quick activity break. I'm going to put up a food on the screen, and I want you guys to draw a beak and like see what kind of beak would maybe eat this food, and I want you guys to hold it up to me or raise your hand when you think you got it. First is seeds. Yes. Okay. That sounds good. Let me see if I can find. Okie dokie. I think you guys can keep drawing if you want, but I'm gonna have one or two of you guys hold it up. All right, so we got oh, I should have had it so like I drew out what you drew so you could see it. Pretty nice. Nice. I like these beaks. They're pretty awesome. All right, so there's obviously a massive variety of what beaks are gonna look like. And even some beaks aren't going to look exactly like what the food they eat. But here's a good example of what eats seeds. You're going to have these slightly chompier beaks that need to break into those seeds or those nuts. You can have things like chickadees that have super small beaks but still eat seeds and stuff, but they're still going to have that kind of chompy shape, if that's scientific enough chompy. All right, next one. Little insects, little grubby boys. What do you guys think? Awesome beak. All right, what are your guys' beaks? What are you thinking? Which beak? There's a few on there. The bottom one? Yeah, nice beak. I like that beak. That's a good beak. Nice. That's the same beak. You showed me the same beak. Ooh, nice. That's actually a very artistic beak. Your beak? Is it the bottom one? I like it. That's actually all pretty close. We're going to have these kind of little stabby baby beaks. A lot of the times when things are eating bugs, they want it slightly further away from their eyeballs and stuff. You'll see specifically with things like bee eaters, they're gonna kind of look like that, but slightly chunkier and a little further from their face because they don't want to be stabbed in the eye. All right, next food. This, long and tubular. That looks like a mosquito. I mean, close, yeah, that's basically it. Nice, that's different from the last one you gave me, I'm proud. Oh yeah. Ooh, that one's so artistic. I love that one. That one makes me so happy. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you guys are doing great. Ooh, there's some long beaks, yeah, show me. Ooh. All right, I'm gonna use the document camera now. Wait, actually first? No way, you guys all got it? All right, now document camera, I'm gonna see maybe if it shows up. Maybe. I think you guys can at least see it, if not people online. Look at that long beak. I just think that's a fun specimen to look at. I think I have a more normal shaped, here's a ruby-throated, which you guys would actually see here. Look at that difference. That beak is actually 2 times the length of that thing. All right. One last food, I think. All right. Oh, it's your pet hamster. How did he get in there? No. What's going to eat it? Don't worry. That's not your pet hamster. It's a vole I pulled off offline. We're going to hope it's not copyrighted. Alrighty, let's see those beaks. Ooh, yeah. Oh, he looks so angry. Ooh, yeah, sharp, nice. What? I'm not, is that top one? I like it. It looks like it has sunglasses on. Yeah, ooh, we got some nice birds here. I like it. Yeah, so we're all getting that, that's the set, no, it's a different one. Okay, thank goodness. That's nice and sharp. You guys are doing awesome. I gotta find my clicker. All right, nice sharp beak. As we can see, we need to penetrate the skin of our prey. All right, so we're gonna look on the document camera again. I think this one is fun to look at. This is a kestrel. This is gonna be one of our smallest raptors that we have. I'm not sure if I can get close enough. Let me see. I'm learning. Anyway, here's a baby kestrel. Maybe? Yeah, oh. Is that focused? All right, so you see how it has that sharp point right there? It also has this kind of tooth, I'm gonna call it. That helps the bird basically grab onto either another bird or the mole or whatever it is and snap its neck. So it helps increase its grabbing potential. All right, I hope you guys liked that beak break. I can leave that guy up here because he's cute. Does that focus? Does that make it more focused? Okay. Moving along. All right, so as I said before, banding is a very common version of data collection. And there's gonna be a lot of banding of game birds, except game birds requires a little bit more thinking in a way, because game birds are birds that we're gonna hunt. And if you're banding a bird and then the next day it gets shot, then there goes your data, I guess. I mean, you still have the data on the bird that you already banded, but you're not gonna get that bird to come back because now it's in someone's house as a trophy. So separately with these guys, they can typically be caught through mist nets if they're small, like this, like a mourning dove. Those will fly right in, and it's no big deal. A lot of the times, they actually want to catch these game birds in massive flocks of like, a lot of the time it's gonna be ducks. I don't think the video shows up here. That's okay, I will explain how awesome it is. It's a rocket net where this rocket shoots out with a net behind it and basically falls down on the birds, and now you have all these birds. Shame that the video didn't come up, but it's pretty fun, just imagine. You guys can draw it out even, I gave you guys paper. Wait, no, it might work. No, wait, maybe someone can click on it. I don't know if anyone's up in the control room. We'll give it a second, maybe. Do, 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 do. Oh, the mouse of truth. Yes! Just wait for it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, tech person. All right, so that's rocket nets. Give it up for rocket nets, everybody. Yeah! All right. So now moving on to how we capture raptors. This is gonna be a little different. The reason why we do it, again, banding. We love banding, but also relocation. A lot of times we get raptors in airports, and although it's fun to see a cool hawk flying next to you as you're taking off in your plane, if that thing gets caught in your engine, we're in trouble. Everybody's in trouble. So it's better they try to relocate these birds instead of shooting them, because we don't want to shoot these birds at the airport. We want to try to either scare them away, or when we relocate them, it has to be like 50 miles or more away. It's quite a bit of work, but again, people who do this work are willing to drive those miles to save this bird. As for banding, I think it's interesting to see that the bands on these raptors are kind of this folded over band in a way, because these raptors are strong. So unlike those little measly bands that we're putting on the songbirds, these raptors will pick and rip off these bands if we leave it with these open holes. And then how do we capture raptors? So unfortunately, we can't put our nets meters and meters and meters high above the ground. That would be awesome. So instead, we take someone's little brother and throw them with a butterfly net to try to catch the raptor in the sky. They love it. Henry, you'd love it. No, so what we do instead is we're gonna put bait under a trap. And a lot of the time, these traps are held up by some sort of stick. And so when the raptor sees this live bait, it's gonna be like, food, no way, I love McDonald's, and flies down and grabs onto the stick to try to land on it. And then the stick's gonna fall and those walls fall inward. And so what happens from there is that we have our live bait on the bottom. It's still fine. We can think of this as it's a separate cage entirely. The raptor's on top and the bird, or typically it'll be like a pigeon or something on the bottom. And from there you have your raptor, and you have to go in and grab it by its feet, and then you can put it in its little cat carrier and then take it wherever you want to take it. So there's also a lot of banding of seabirds. Seabirds are, again, kind of a different story. You have to catch them when they're babies, because these things fly for a very long time and they soar, and you're not really gonna get them any other way. So this is a picture right here. That's not me. That is one of my friends. These are baby pelicans. They're on an island and they're running around. It's really fun. What they had to do is we had to run around and kind of wrangle them up like a little cow herd, and then you just grab their beak gently and then pick them up like a football. And then you bring them over to a bander, and that's John Gurham right there banding the bird. And from there, maybe we'll capture the bird again. It's pretty fun. But for a lot of things, not just pelicans, a lot of seabirds are going to need to be banded either while they're in the nest or as babies. This takes a lot of walking around typically. A lot of people who do this work complain that they have to walk through a lot of mud. So now that we're done, I think that's a good overview of all the live birds. Let's go to what I do most of the time in the collection. So the collection, if you were here for Mike's talk like a few months ago, you may have gotten a little rundown. Basically, the collection is a massive room, 2 stories underground in our other building. It contains all the ologies. We got geology, paleontology, mammalogy, ornithology. We got any ology you could ever want. It's a pretty epic room. Anyway, that specific cabinet lane is our specific ornithology lane. And so these cabinets are really tight together. We can move these shelves around if we need them. This is a picture of specifically some of our songbirds. These drawers can basically be right on top of each other because these birds are so small, but when we have bigger birds, say a big fat seabird, we're going to have quite a bit of space in between those drawers so we can actually fit these seabirds properly. Now, how a bird moves through our collection is we first have to get the bird, then we're going to prepare the bird, then we got to freeze the bird to get rid of any bugs that might be on it that we can't see. Then we're going to enter this bird's data into the database, and that can finally go into those pretty little drawers that you see. So first, when we receive the birds, a lot of the time when we receive birds, it'll actually be from the public, like you guys. If you see a bird dead on the side of the road, or maybe it ran into your window and you're like, oh no, or your cat killed it and you're like, oh no, that can come to us. And as long as it has the location and date, this is enough data for us to do something with it. A lot of the time, we can also get kind of a bulk collection of dead birds from wildlife rehabilitation centers and airports. Rehabilitation centers are going to get a lot of birds, typically from the coast when you see all these sick seabirds, and they're going to be brought in. They can't always be saved, and so they save them in the freezer for us, so we can save them in our basement. And sometimes we get bulk birds from airports. Like I mentioned before, when birds get near planes, it can be really unsafe for everybody in the plane. Unfortunately, for airports, they're massive fields of grass typically, and birds really like massive fields of grass. Guys, you remember when I brought up like the grassland stuff and birds like grass? Anyway, they also like airport grass, and that's a little not great, but the people at the airport try to scare these birds away. They try to do as much as they can, but if there's a plane already coming, there's not much they can do, so they sometimes have to shoot the birds. Luckily enough, at least these birds aren't going to waste because they're coming to us for data collection and for general specimen prep. Now for specimen prep, that's the fun part. So if you guys see your fun little manuals here, I don't know if you already looked at them, that's generally how we prep a bird. It can be done in many different ways. I specifically do what's called a chest cut, where you cut more near the top. Those pamphlets, I think, show you how to do a specimen prep when you're cutting at the belly. Basically, what we're doing is we're leaving some bones in the bird, but we want to take out the main body. If you think of a chicken, that's kind of what we want coming out of the bird. We want like a chicken carcass coming out. So what I do if I was skinning a bird, I just cut at the chest, cut the neck, and then the skin can come down. Then you cut kind of where the shoulder is, and then so you're leaving those bones in, and then the skin can come down some more, and you're gonna cut where the knee is on the bird. And the reason you gotta cut where the knee is because the skin under that is kind of be where the scales of the bird legs are. And even if we tried to skin that off, I mean, it would be kind of weird and lanky. Like imagine just a bird leg without the leg in it. Anyway, if we took that out, then the skin isn't going to stay intact very well because that skin down there is really thin. It would be very rare that we'd be able to get it all out in one piece. So anyway, we're keeping those kind of elbow up bones in, we're keeping the knee down bones in, and we're going to keep the majority of like the skull in. because if we took out the skull of a bird, now you have a specimen without a beak, and it's going to look kind of crazy. And there's also not a point in having a specimen without that, because you can't really see what the specimen looks like. But we don't only do skins. We do a lot of different types. We will do wings. We will do skeletons. We almost always take tissues on all of our specimens, because there's really no reason not to. A lot of our loan requests that we get are specifically for tissues, because there's a lot of DNA work that can be done now with new technology on how to do all this with tissues. So once we're done prepping the bird, it's going to go into freezing for a while. It's only about a month, but this freezing process will kill anything that's on the bird. Originally, we used to use something called a fumigant, which basically was a very strong chemical that would kill the pests. But unfortunately, this is like actually horrible for us, because I mean, it's killing bugs. It's gonna mess with our kidneys and stuff. So we're using freezing instead as a safer method. If we find bugs in our collection, we'll probably use a little bit of fumigant in that cabinet and seal it off, and then air it out in another room. After it's frozen, it can be brought down to bee level, and some of the data can be entered into our database. So a lot of the data we take on a bird is kind of like an autopsy that you'd take on a person once they died. Let me see here. I have a tag here. I think it's the same one that's up there. But if the document camera will switch, it might not for the people online. Forward. All right. That might be readable. Oh, perfect. Okay. Anyway, this is the species name. That's our NCSM number, so that's our catalog number. That's the really important number that makes it so we can look up this bird and what data it has. Going to be the sex. Sometimes we don't know it. Sometimes we can't find it. This is going to be all of our location data. It goes by state, then county, then more specifically, it could be from like someone's house, or this one was from one of the airport. Then we sometimes get latitude, longitude, but not always. Then we have our collector and time it was collected. And that's all the stuff that we get if someone turns in a bird. On the back is all the stuff that we get while skinning the bird. So we have our temp number, which is, I forgot to mention, is the thing we enter onto the bird when it first comes into the lab. We give it a temp number, but not a catalog number, because there's a chance that we might not keep that bird. It could stay in the freezer for too long and we have to throw it away, or maybe we decide we just can't do all of them, so we want to give them to another museum. There's multiple things that could happen between this temp tag and the catalog tag. From there, we have the weight already that'll be taken when we do the temp tag. And then we can get fat, skull ossification. As I said before, skull ossification can be really useful when aging a bird. Some birds, like seabirds and raptors and stuff like that, they have such thick skulls that you can't really tell the specific ossification, and it's not as useful as it is in songbirds in terms of aging, because these birds live a lot longer. So they ossify within like the first few months or the first year, and then it doesn't really matter after that. From there, we can take we can look at what we know as the bursa. And the bursa is going to be something kind of near where the exit hole of the intestine is. It's going to be under that part of the intestine. And think of this as kind of a mini immune system for little babies that have not been exposed to the environment much. This has a lot of antibiotics in it, kind of. It keeps the bird from getting sick as easily as this baby. So a younger bird is going to have more of a bursa. When the bird gets older, the bursa goes away. And then finally, we'll look at the gonads. I didn't want to show a picture of this just because it's a little gory to look inside of the bird. If you don't know the plumage through the sex, like if the bird is not sexually dimorphic, meaning it doesn't have a plumage that's different between the different sexes, then it's really useful to have this gonad data, because you know exactly what sex it is. Also, specifically for females, we can tell if they've had an egg or not. You can actually tell if some of the eggs have been ruptured, meaning that they have been used, or if their oviduct is very large, which means an egg has come out. And finally, sometimes we'll have little notes on there on like how they were collected. This one was through depredation. It was killed at the airport because it was in the way of an airplane. We'll just have a prep number and prep type and who prepped it. Anyway, that is the data that we have on the bird, and that goes all into the database. And then what's important about that is that once it goes into the database, people who are looking to do stuff with this data can look it up and find these birds that have this. Maybe they want all birds that are from Cary. Then they can look up all these birds from Cary. Now after that, these birds go into installation, where they just go into their drawers and they stay there for a very long time, and hopefully for a long time. What we need to do every year is have what we call a bug check. A bug check ensures that no way, there's no bugs. I have an example here, document camera. I don't know if this is doing anything for the video people, but that looks pretty bad. That is basically just cotton and a little bit of bone. Like I said before, here's the skull that we keep in. We cut off kind of like a square in the back and keep the rest in there. But the rest of that is basically gone. And that was because one day John said he was looking around checking for bugs, and this, I think it's a burrowing owl, I don't know how I'd be able to tell that, just was eaten by moths. So this is why we need to check bugs every year. That's kind of a tedious process. It typically just occurs slowly throughout the year of checking cabinets, because you have to go through each cabinet, through each drawer, and look through each bird for a bug. So it takes quite a bit, but it's important because or else that happens. So why do we keep collections? As I've kind of mentioned flippantly throughout this, a lot of our stuff is used for research. People will ask for loans and stuff of like tissues to do DNA work on. And we can use our collections for stuff like this. For education, you guys get to see dead birds, or you see wild birds that maybe you wouldn't be able to touch normally. We've also had artists come down to actually study really closely what these birds look like. Again, photographs are great, but sometimes you really need to see the details close up. And then that is basically me done talking. Now, you guys can either ask questions. I'm going to have this up here, a lot of stuff to do up here. I will gladly talk about everything that's up here. But first we'll do a little bit of questions.
Thank you, Kira. It's time for Q&A. Raise your hand and look for the cafe coordinator volunteers in purple shirts who will bring the microphone to you. Please wait for the microphone before asking your question. This is important so our guests in the cafe can hear you, but also for our online audience.
I didn't know I was coming back.
Hey, I'm a amateur bird photographer, so I'm like kid in a candy store here. So thank you for doing this. I got a lot of questions, so anybody wants to interrupt and ask a question, please go ahead, all right? The first thing is like one of the first slides you had a sensor attached to a songbird. Is that what you primarily use for, what is used for migration tracking across countries? Or because if you go to the Audubon Society or the Cornell University website, you can see this number of birds migrated through this path on an hourly basis. So is that what it is used for?
I think that specific website is actually due to public spottings and professional spottings. These transmitters only last for so long. They do have a battery life a lot of the time. So they're great when you want to track for a certain amount of time, but they're not going to last forever. A lot of these transmitters, especially on songbirds, actually have biodegradable string. So if we don't catch this bird again, it'll just fall off, and it's no big deal. Again, this is great for tracking specific birds, but this isn't like a massive effort that's done to track a bunch of birds at once. Specifically with transmitters on songbirds, this is kind of a new technology because, I mean, transmitters have been used on big things for a very long time because they're big, and so they can carry big things. But it's really hard to make a transmitter that's like less than a gram. So it takes a lot of work to put all of this data into this tiny transmitter. So this isn't going to be a big technology. Maybe in the future, there'll be a lot more birds that have all these transmitters on them. But specifically, I think when it comes to all these spottings, that actually just has to do with this person saw this flock of birds in this state, and all of a sudden they don't see any flock of birds, and this state sees birds. So you kind of track it using that.
All right. My next question is, you mentioned Uvaris as the place where you go and track. Is that because it's in the migration path, or are you looking at those birds, or just the local species of birds?
So that project was originally started by some of my older colleagues and John Gerwin. So I'm not sure exactly why that site was picked. I think it really has to do with that place is a private piece of land that's managed really well, and so it's a really convenient place to be looking at wildlife, especially because it's in such a rural area that we can see more of those birds. We also barely have any data about organisms in general in that area, because a lot of these people are going to be really far apart. A lot of these people are farmers, so they're not always like super into like nerdy, oh my gosh, it's this butterfly or this bird, so they're not going to like write it down. So it's kind of useful to have this data here because no one else is taking this data.
What's the biggest bird you ever prepared?
I recently did a northern gannet. That big, I think. We recently got a heron that I think I'm supposed to do at some point, which if you include the neck is, but the actual body itself isn't all that big. A lot of times with herons, it's just the neck is so long, so they look massive, but they're not as massive preparing as you think they are.
What is the funniest experience you've had when dealing with live birds?
I get bit a lot, but I'm not sure I've had a specifically funny experience. Sometimes I need to, when I'm giving an education for a group of people, we'll get a lot of cardinals, and cardinals scream so loud. They're like the spiciest birds ever. They're really tough and really awesome, and I'm really happy they're screaming because it means they're alive, but they sometimes scream so loud you can't actually hear what I'm saying, so you kind of have to shut their beak while talking to people. The kids find that really funny. It doesn't hurt the bird at all, you're just closing their mouth, but I think the kids really like that, and I think that considers funny. Yeah, shut. Can you say that one more time? Say steady.
Okay, now it is working.
One more time.
Yeah, so do you normally sedate a bird, especially raptors and things like that when you're banding?
I don't have any experience actually banding raptors. That is, again, done by a lot of our colleagues at the airport. They typically, I don't think, need to sedate them. You just need nice big gloves, and then you just have to grab onto their feet, and then from there, they're just going to flap around a bit. You just got to have a good grip on them. I don't typically think they need to sedate them. I think that's typically maybe if you need to do rehab or maybe some medical work on them. But when you're transporting them, I think you can keep them alive. The bigger the bird is, typically the tougher they are. So they can go through a lot more than you think they can. They don't want to be in your hands, so they're going to try to get away. But they're typically calm enough.
Okay, I have another question. So if you find a dead bird in your backyard, do you normally bring it here for collections, or how does it work?
Yeah, so say you guys found something dead in your backyard. First thing you need to do is write down the location and date that you found it, because if we don't have that, then the bird, we might do it, but it's not really all that useful for us because that's the main data that's important when having a bird. From there, you can bring it up to the elder building in the front desk. A lot of the front desk people are trained. You can say, hey, I have a bird for the ornithology collection. They know where our freezer is, the floor below, and they can deliver it to that freezer. So if they don't know, it's not a big deal. Maybe someone is in the collection downstairs. You can ask them maybe to call the lab to see if anyone's down there, and then they'll be able to come up and grab it.
So with regards to the collection, what would the protocols or like rules be for something that was like recently extinct? So like a Carolina parakeet, ivory woodpecker, something like that. Are there specific protocols for extinct? I
think we have to fill out specific paperwork for endangered species when we get them and report it to, I forgot what federal agency it is. It's very rare that we get that. We'd probably still be keeping it as a specimen. Typically when we get rare birds, we try to save as much as possible. So we can't save a full skeleton, but we'd rather have a skin than a full skeleton. So what we do is we take a skin, we take as much of the bones as we can. So instead of just snapping the bones like we would on any other bird just because it's easy, we would dislocate all these bones, try to keep them intact, and then we would take a tissue sample. We'd do as much as we can to keep as much of that bird as possible. But I think the main protocol I would say is we save as much as possible. I think we do have to fill out some type of form saying that we received a rare bird though.
And then as kind of a continuation, does the ornithology collections have any extinct, like as in recently extinct specimens?
I think we do. There's so much in the collection. I'm not particularly sure. I'm sure we have something that's extinct somewhere. I wish John was here because he knows everything. But I'm going to say tentatively yes. Probably, I'm not sure which one though.
Thank you.
About how long does banding last?
Banding typically will take a weekend. We can, depending on how cold it is outside, if it's during the winter, we might have to start a little later in the day, maybe about 7 or 8. We're not supposed to band birds when it's freezing because it's insane to keep a bird sitting in it while they're freezing. We'll typically band before sunrise to about sunset, depending on the specific day. Sometimes we'll end early just because most of the birds we're going to get is in the morning, and when it dies down at about 1 o'clock, we're going to get maybe 1 or 2 birds a net session. At that point, we're just deciding if we want to wait 3 hours for nothing or if we want to drive 2 hours home to get a head start on going home. So we typically do this for at least 2 days in a row, though, and then we'll take the nets down afterwards.
What would be the most common bird that you band?
At the banding station, we get a lot of different sparrows. During the summer, we get so many yellow-breasted chats. It feels like we've banded every chat in the world. We also get a lot of common yellowthroats. No way, they're called common yellowthroats. But yeah, I'd say in general, our highest would be sparrows in general, common yellowthroats, and yellow-breasted chats specifically in the summer.
What do you use the time and location and date for when you receive a dead bird?
When is it, like now? Oh, what do we use it for? Okay, so basically location and date is the most important part of getting a bird because we want to know where it is when. And so if we don't have where it is when, then we just have this bird that came from I don't know when. And at that point, I mean, it's great for autopsy data. You know something about this bird, but the same species of bird can differ greatly in its makeup depending on where it is in the country. So the data is a little bit useless when we don't know exactly where this bird is from because we don't know where we should attribute it to.
Thank you again, Kira. And thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the talk and learned something new. Thank you to the museum's digital media team for assisting with our online presentation, and to the Daily Planet Cafe staff for hosting us. If you want to check out archived content from previous Teen Science Cafes or watch this presentation again, you can find videos on them on the museum's YouTube channel. All right, and also, cafe coordinator applications are now open. If you are a rising 9th through 12th grader who would be interested in helping organize these presentations, the application deadline is Monday, April 29th, 2024. Head to naturalscience.org and search under the Learn tab. We break for the summer, but hope you join us on Friday, September 6th for science trivia, when we'll kick off the 24-25 school year. Finally, we appreciate your feedback on the cafe survey. Take it, turn it in at the exit door to get it a treat for completing it. Thank you for listening. Have a great evening.